Hello again, everyone. I'm Susie Kohler. I'm with Alachua Conservation Trust, and this is the webinar for our Forest to Gulf and Lake to Lagoon RCPP Land Management Assistance Programs for the year of 2026. We're going to be taking applications through July 31st. We're going to go through these programs. I'm going to introduce you to some people. Just a little bit of other housekeeping things. We are recording this webinar, and we are going to make it available for those that couldn't join us today. So watch for updates about that on our website and in social media. We can also email participants and partners about that opportunity. And secondly, of course, we're recording this so that we can share it. And lastly, if you do have questions, the chat should be enabled. You could put those in the chat. We'll take some periodic breaks so that we can answer questions. But I'm going to start now, moving into welcoming our guest speakers. So in addition to myself as the RCPP coordinator, we have George Johnson. And George, maybe say a couple words, say hello.
Hi, I'm George Johnson. I'm the Conservation Practice Specialist at ACT. I am a retired NRCS district conservationist, so I have some expertise in the land management field.
And also our Susan Carr, who's also with ACT and was very instrumental in drafting a lot of the RCPP proposals.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, I'm Susan Carr. I work for the Alachua Conservation Trust. That is what ACT stands for. We'll probably say it a whole bunch of times. And good to be here. Susan Carr.
So guys, I'm going to start with just a little bit of history about Alachua Conservation Trust. We've been working in the North Florida area since the late 1980s. So many years. We've got a 22 county working area that spans from, the kind of the end of the panhandle to the bottom of North Central Florida. We do a lot in the community with private landowners on habitat restoration and management. So a lot with prescribed fire, as that picture shows, but also other conservation land management practices. We have a wonderful environmental education and outreach program. You can learn all about that on our website. And then, of course, at the heart of all this is our conservation of land and also holding conservation easements. We've been busy since that founding, and a big part of our work is to help facilitate the conservation easement process with landowners. We work with a lot of the state programs like Rural and Family Lands, Florida Forever, and of course with also the county programs. Alachua Forever is a big partner that we work with. We've directly acquired some 27,000 acres. 6,300 of those are owned and managed by ACT. And then a lot of those are preserves that are open to the public. And so you can learn more about those on our website. And then over 7,000 acres are in private land conservation easements where the property owner, retains the right to that property for themselves and whatever they desire. So we're going to start now to move more into RCPP, and I'm going to turn the ship over to Susan Carr, who's going to talk about the Regional Conservation Partnership Program.
Thank you, Susie. Yes, as Susie mentioned, so ACT is a nonprofit organization, and we do a lot of things. But we work with our friends at the Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS. It's another acronym we're probably going to say 10,000 times. In fact, we're sitting at the NRCS office right now. So we work with NRCS, which is itself part of the USDA, federal government, in a big partnership program, actually several partnership programs. These programs are called Regional Conservation Partnership Programs, RCPP. So I'm defining our terms here a little bit. So RCPP itself is the name of the program. It is actually a Farm Bill program. So it's authorized and funded through the Farm Bill, which is a national legislation. And what it does is RCPP, if we go through a pretty rigorous application process and all this kind of stuff. And so if the NRCS chooses to partner with us, that we, ACT, and a whole slew of contributing partners can help NRCS administer Farm Bill programs or conservation delivery, right? So we're bringing conservation to the ground with our partners at NRCS. So RCPP allows us to do that. RCPP takes a very regional focus to this effort, and it usually centers on specific resource concerns. And next slide. Okay, so this is sort of, it's very top down. We're going to get to the land management part here in a second, but in general, the partnership structure looks like this. So we enter into a great big agreement with NRCS. So the NRCS here is contributing a lot of financial assistance, i.e. funding toward the program. And we are the lead partner, ACT. And then we have a lot of contributing partners as well. So it also allows us to bring in other contributors like state government, county government, that sort of thing. So it's really kind of a big tent approach to this. So and that's a 5-year agreement. So under all this, it really brings two things to the ground. It brings funding and technical assistance for conservation easements. And we're not going to talk about that today, but I just want to mention that it brings funding for these easement programs. And some of y'all are probably participating in those programs. Those collectively are called entity-held easements. But it also brings funding for land management contracts with private landowners on private lands for conservation practices. And that's what George is going to talk a lot about. So that's sort of the bottom rung there of this slide. So in this capacity, ACT as lead partner is really facilitating. We're doing the outreach and a lot of the primary contacts with landowners to get landowners into contracts with NRCS, the federal government, to bring financial assistance in the form of funding and technical assistance in the form of technical assistance to get conservation land management done. Okay, so there are actually a lot of these RCPP agreements, projects in North Florida. There's actually 7 of them that are active right now. I've only mapped actually 4 on this map because these 4 right now, and the gray blob actually encompasses 2 RCPP agreements that are through the North Florida Land Trust. Okay, that's another land trust based in Jacksonville, and they're going to be having their own webinar and stuff coming up pretty soon. So we work pretty closely with them. But I want to mention that spatially now, if you're looking at this map, you're up in Baker County or Duval County or whatever, please call North Florida Land Trust so you're in their area. These programs are very area based, as you can see. So the ones that we're going to talk about today are Forest to Gulf. We always give them these catchy little names, right? Forest to Gulf and Lake to Lagoon. So it's the green one and the blue one on the slide. So if you're in those areas, you have come to the right place. And again, I wanted to say there are 7 active RCPPs, but right now these 4, there's some in the Panhandle that I did not put on this slide, but these 4 right now are moving forward with land management signups as we speak. Next slide. So kind of to drill down, if you are in the Forest to Gulf RCPP area, there you are on the left in the green. These tend to, we draw them to follow watersheds and other things that don't always conform to political boundaries. So that's what happened with Forest to Gulf. But it takes in all of Levy County, half of Marion County, Citrus County, and then little bits of Alachua County, Putnam County, and very little bits of Hernando and Sumter counties down there at the bottom. So now Lake to Lagoon, which is our other RCPP that has active land management going on, that is over in Volusia County. It takes in the whole of Volusia County, a little bit of Flagler County, and Eastern Lake County. So those 3 county areas. Okay, so I'll just really quickly go through the primary goals of each one. The Forest to Gulf one, that's the one that's over in West Central Florida. Our primary goals are to for more land protection via conservation easements on private lands, but we're not going to talk about that very much. And then more land management, conservation land management, again, by facilitating these contract agreements between private landowners and the NRCS. And one, I guess, really benefit of doing these RCPPs is it allows the partners and NRCS to kind of hone in on specific practices to address specific resource concerns. So this Forest to Gulf one is really centered around fire management, prescribed burning, and all the associated sort of practices that go along with that, and forest management, and wildlife habitat restoration and management. So this one really is kind of a very forest based. That's not to say that grazing lands and wetlands are not eligible. They are eligible, but the focus is a lot on these sorts of forest and fire and wildlife habitat practices. The Lake to Lagoon RCPP is pretty similar. It's actually just getting started in terms of overall funding for land management. There's a lot more funding there, and George is going to be working pretty hard on this the next few years. And the goals are, again, more land management. This one really, again, this is about conservation easement. This one really leverages Volusia Forever, which is a county program for the land protection side. But on the land management side, again, ACT is working to facilitate these land management contracts for resource concerns around forest fire, wildlife habitat, but also resiliency and sustainability, including grazing lands, watershed protection, wetland protection, and it's pretty broad. So next slide. Okay, so I'm just going to wrap up and then hand it to George here. So our overall goals and why do we do RCPP kind of thing is that these are really novel programs. A lot of you might already be involved with EQIP, Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or conservation stewardship programs. This is very similar, but it is novel in that it allows us to target resource concerns in a very specific region and target specific practices. So that's a lot of why we do it. And it also allows ACT and other partners to expand our outreach and target landowners, for specific practices. And okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to George Johnson. Thank you.
Okay. So like Susan said, our land management priorities are like we kind of focus in a little bit more than what normal USDA EQIP, CSP, which is Environmental Quality Incentive Program, Conservation Stewardship Program. They're eligible for all kinds of land uses, all kinds of resource concerns. We're trying to get more focused into water quality and wildlife management, forestry management. So this is an example of one that we did recently in the Forest to Gulf. And this project really highlights the partnership that works really well. So this particular person, they had been working with the Florida Forest Service, and they were able to get some funding to help them plant longleaf pines on their family farm. But in addition to that, there was practices that RCPP could help with. So we helped them with helping them fund putting the fire breaks in and doing the prescribed fire prior to the planting. And of course, now these fire breaks will be useful in the future for maintenance of this longleaf pine forest that's being established here. And this is one of our primary goals, is restoring longleaf pine in this Forest to Gulf region. Next step. This example is in Levy County. You can see it's all forested land. It's a 2024 application, so this contract is in the process of being approved right now. So that person will soon be able to get to work doing prescribed fire, forest stand improvements, which in this case, there's situations where fire has not been on the land in quite some time. The fuel loads might be too high for them to burn safely and not kill all the trees. So you're all aware of that. So sometimes some management, the brush management and/or forest stand improvement are practices that can be used to reduce the fuel loads and get ready to start getting people back on a prescribed fire schedule that mimics that nature as much as possible. He's also going to be doing some planting some food species in amongst his forest, and then this would be like planting persimmons or some native forage that that wildlife need, help improve their habitat. And it's also sites on this piece of property where they're gonna site prep and replant some trees. So this kind of really focuses in on most of the primary goals of the forest to go. And next. So here's an interesting one in that this land, it's a small land, it's probably only about 20 acres if I remember correctly. It's in Citrus County, and it was land, it was a DOT lot in the past. So they parked vehicles and they dumped trash, and it was a real mess before the current landowner took over it. And as happens with a lot of DOT equipment, when they get out, they pick up a lot of invasive species and they bring it wherever they get parked. And so this person has a lot of coconut grass, a lot of Caesar weed, a whole slew of different invasive plants. So one of the practices we're doing on this site is herbaceous weed management, trying to deal with the invasive species, but they're also planting trees. And you can see that these folks have, it's a small property, so they're able to do this. So you can see they've taken some extreme measures to try to make sure you got enough moisture on their plants. So that's not typical, but it just shows the wide variety of people that we get to deal with and help out. And a lot of the site is it's like a sandhill type of site, most of it. There's some lowlands, but a lot of the scrubby oaks are taken over. So the goal of this person was to get rid of that scrubby oak stuff and reestablish a longleaf pine forest. Next slide. So this one's very unique, and it was a grazing operation, a small grazing operation. They're trying to do their best to maintain, to follow organic type of practices. It's not organically certified, but they're doing the best they can to keep the inputs down on pesticides and fertilizer. So in the northern portion there is the wooded area, and there is, we didn't actually do it in this particular contract. We're planning on helping with the fencing to keep livestock out of the stream. And again, this is a big part of what RCPP does, is that we can help you get in touch with your NRCS people for their programs and see what programs fit best. So my job is to help you come up with a plan and then come up with ways to implement that plan. And there may be several ways of doing it. RCPP in one of them, the Environmental Quality Incentive Program another, and Conservation Stewardship Program is another. These folks had an irrigation system for their hayfields and their pastures, basically. It's a very high, dry soil, and they have a hard time growing grass on it. So they had this, it turned out to be a really inefficient irrigation system, and they were looking to try to fix that, but there was a lot of challenges. But just by, just because of my past experience, I was able to help them try to figure out ways to run their system to get a little better system, get a little bit better results from the irrigation system. So by using the irrigation water management concepts the NRCS uses in a lot of their other programs, I was able to help them just with technical assistance alone. And they did end up getting fencing with a subsequent EQIP contract. So this was a pretty interesting project that worked out well for the landowner in several different ways. Next slide. This particular place is in Gilchrist County. This was actually and that last one was also in our Service to Springs program, which we're out of right now. We've done 3 years of that. But this is an example of what can be done. This particular landowner had a lot of forage for cattle grazing that was annually planted crop of some sort, some kind of forage that he annually planted. And one of our priorities is to try to get more permanent vegetation on these agricultural lands. So the gentleman wanted to plant actual perennial crops where he was planting annual crops. So now he's got a permanent pasture in several of these fields. And he also wanted to increase the forage and the diversity and maybe reduce his nutrient inputs by planting legumes into some of his existing perennial pastures. And he's quite excited about that. He's hoping to spend less money on fertilizer and hopefully produce more cattle. Obviously, the benefits are soil health benefits and reducing the fertilizer and reducing groundwater contamination. I was also able to help him come up with a nutrient management plan, so he's gonna be doing some pretty high-tech nutrient management when he does it, including grid sampling and basically variable treatment, variable application of these fertilizers. So he's looking forward to hopefully better production and less inputs, and obviously better environmental outcomes. Next, please. This is an example of the average, the normal concert. There's other ones. These are the normal, most common. Most common practices that we do. You see, a lot of this is in the forest situation. So prescribed fire is a big one. It's not a high dollar amount, so it kind of takes up a lot of the practice numbers, but not necessarily the big dollars. The big dollars come in where they're doing either the forest stand improvement by having to mulch with heavy equipment to reduce understory treatment, or actual tree planting. Again, we did some pasture planting with our dollars, because the whole concept of getting into permanent pasture and improving soil quality is one of our big goals. There's some of the average prices there. I don't think there's anything else there. We can talk about these are the rates that NRCS pays. So let's just talk about that for a minute. So, like I said, these RCPP, you're dealing with me and ACT, but these are NRCS programs. So NRCS programs, these RCPP contracts work almost identically in practice with the Environmental Quality Incentive Program contracts. So what happens is we come up with a plan, we come up with practices that will meet your resource concerns and meet your goals and objectives. And then NRCS has a practice payment schedule. They have a rate that will be paid based on a per acre or per foot or whatever the practice may be. So that rate is something that doesn't change. So that rate is something that gets paid to the landowner when the practice is completed according to NRCS standards and specifications. So no matter what it costs somebody, they can do it on their own and save the labor and do their own and get paid for their own labor, or they can pay somebody. But the bottom line is, no matter what it costs them to do that job, they get the same kind of payment rate. So it's a known in that you know what you're going to get. So when I speak to landowners prior to signing contracts, the goal is to get them this information up front so that they know way ahead of time what they're going to get reimbursed, and then they can decide what it's going to cost them to get it done, and then they can decide whether they want to enter into a contract or not. And we get into specific costs if you want, but there's several of them laid out there. These rates are subject to change year to year. They have a regional team that comes up with these numbers, and they do their best to keep up to date. I think we can go to the next. So far as to go, like I say, we've done our service to Springs for 3 years, and we've exhausted our funds for that project. We have this signed up for Forest to Gulf, so we're going to talk about that. So since 2023, we've put out $800,000 in financial assistance contracts. I think on that last slide, I talked about the average is, the average is about $20,000 per contract. We have contracts as low as $3,000 or $4,000, and we've had one which is getting ready to be signed in the Gulf in this area for $450,000, which is the maximum allowed by NRCS. You can see we've covered quite a few acres. Next. Lake Lagoon has been a challenge. We started with 2024 sign up, and we had about 25, at least we had 17 applications in Lake County and Volusia County. And they request the estimates that I came up for these 17 applications was about $175,000. The federal freeze happened, so we stopped work for 5 months. And since that time, 7 of these applications were moved to EQIP and were funded that way. So we still have 10 existing. And yes, so at this point, we're looking at about $110,000, which are still in the process of being evaluated and ranked to see who's going to get funded for this year. So right now we're working to execute these contracts as rapidly as we can. Next. This is the nuts and bolts of why I'm here. ACT hired me because I understand NRCS, so I can translate for most people. So the hardest part probably for a lot of people is how to get started. And so getting started is as simple as calling your NRCS office or contact ACT directly. And somebody will be working with you to help plan the activities you want on your land. If it's an RCPP, because of our partnership agreement, then I will be the person doing it at this moment to take the workload off NRCS offices, but we work closely with them. So you contact an office and say you're interested in some land management applications. I have had people over the years that know exactly what they want, and I've had people that have no idea what they're going to do. So it ranges the whole gamut, and it's still that same way. So we're here to provide technical assistance and help you figure out how to meet your goals and objectives. Next step is to fill out a CPA 1200, which is an application. This is the same application, the same form that NRCS uses for their EQIP program and their CSP program. And part of what I can help you do in our planning process is help you figure out which, if any, or more than one, may suit your needs. So that's part of the expertise you get from ACT on this in this process. You have to get in contact with the Farm Service Agency, FSA. FSA is, for lack of a better word, a record-keeping part of USDA. So they will establish a farm record, give you a farm number and a tract number, and that all seems weird, but bottom line, you identify where your property is, know where it's at, so that we can get you into the system and start servicing your needs. If you're in a forest situation, NRCS policy requires you have a forestry management plan. So the sooner you can get that done by either a certified forester or a supply contractor or from the Florida Forest Service, it doesn't matter exactly. So long as you have a forest management plan that outlines your forestry management practices for your land. NRCS needs that before we can finalize contracting and make you any payments. So these 4 steps aren't necessarily in order. They can go back and forth, whatever, but the bottom line is these all need to be done before you can actually get a contract. And as you're doing some of this stuff, we can start with the rest of this, which I'll follow up on next. But these are very important, have to be done. Most people find this the most tedious. I have the ability to help you through that FSA process. Generally speaking, it's best to make an appointment with your Farm Service Agency person. And in most cases, you can go in there, bring the documents they tell you need to bring, ownership of land and ownership of companies or corporations or whatever corporate structure you have. Or if you're just an individual, the bottom line is they will help you probably in one sitting do what you need to do, because you could ask them to send out forms and you're going to fill them out. Invariably, they'll be wrong, and then you can go back and forth. You go in there one time, they fill out the forms at the computer, you sign them, and usually it's done. So that's my recommendation to most people. So somewhere in this process, it'll be a site visit. If it's an RCPP, I will definitely be involved. And site visits, if I just came from one yesterday, and I had the district conservationist was there from NRCS. I had the biologist from Fish and Wildlife Service was there. We were walking the woods for a couple hours trying to figure out what to do. So the site visit is important, and we referred to the person's forestry management plan to see what was in it, see what needed to be changed, and we kind of came up with a general idea of what this person would like to do to meet their goals and objectives. So my next step in a case like that is I will develop the draft plan. And the plan consists of what are you going to do, when are you going to do it, and where are you going to do it. So if you're going to do prescribed fire, as example, I will make some maps. I'll make some maps, and I'll come up with hopefully easy to understand maps as to where these land units are and what practices are being scheduled. And then on that plan, there will also be a scheduled date. Scheduled dates in NRCS world is get it done by date. So So if we say you're gonna get this job done by September of 2028, that's when hopefully the contract that contract item with that practice is related to, will be done, over with, checked out, and paid by then. NRCS rules for RCPP and EQIP show that they're trying to keep everybody on schedule. It's the best thing we can do is try to plan with enough time, realizing that nature is not always going to cooperate. You may not find contractors. I've always in my career tried to give enough time to account for that if possible. And there is no penalties for doing stuff early. So even if a practice says it's going to be done in 2028, if you get the opportunity in the situation and it meets your goals and objectives to do it earlier, you can get it done earlier and get paid for it and possibly end the contract sooner than it's ready to expire. So there's some flexibility in it that way. So that's the plan and the draft plan. And related to that plan, I will also prepare a payment estimate. Just like I said before, each practice has a payment rate that will be paid based on the number of units, either acres or feet, whatever your practice is. I will say, if you get this contract, and the bottom line is it's always an if. Every one of these contracts, we go through this process, and once we get to this point, they'll all be ranked. And there's a ranking criteria based on ACT priorities, and also NRCS has input into priorities that they want to prioritize, and you'll get a ranking. And what we do is we go down their list of highest ranked applications until we run out of money. So it's never a guarantee, and I always stress very carefully that is anything we do now is nothing is guaranteed. And I usually tell people, if especially in a case like a prescribed fire, if you get the chance to do this before a contract is signed and everything's perfect and you're going to do it anyway, don't wait, because you're not guaranteed you're going to get a contract. You're not going to be guaranteed to get those conditions again. So at this point, it's a draft plan, it's a payment estimate. I provide that to the landowner who looks it over. And the situation here is now you have this plan, and you know what NRCS is going to reimburse you for. Now you got homework to do. Now you have to figure out who's going to do this job. It's time to find contractors, just talk to them, find suppliers, like nurseries or fencing companies or whatever. And you got to come up and figure out what it's going to cost you to do the job before you decide to sign a contract. Because sometimes people get in way over their head, and they can't do a lot of work themselves. They got to pay a lot of high-priced contractors, and they come back and say, this contract isn't paying enough. Well, the contract's going to pay what it's going to pay. And that's something you've got to remember. So once the landowner agrees to it, this draft plan and payment estimate will be ranked, and the top-ranked applications will be selected for funding. So where we at? Okay. So let me go back to right, we're going to work with you and the draft plan, by the way, starts out, there may be several alternatives. You may have several different ways to skin this cat, and so you decide whether you want to do a mechanical treatment, or if you can do a burn, or if you got to do a combination of both. So that's part of the process of working through this draft planning situation. This plan, prior to ranking, can be changed at any time. Once we put it in there and you say you like it, it's too late to change it, because at this point we're working on deadlines. Everybody starts changing everything. We can't do that. So the bottom line is to figure out what you want to do and commit to it. Say, that's what I want to do, and that's what gets ranked. At that point, I send all this information to the district conservationists, and they rank it, and they'll fund it. If it gets funded, they'll be notified. They sign the contract, and once it gets obligated, they can go to work. It's important to know that anything done prior to contract obligation can't be reimbursed. So again, if you're going to do it, you just got to let the conservationists know. Even at the time of contracting, there are certain practices might be left off a contract if they've already been done, because we can't pay for it after the fact. The applicant will sign the contract, NRCS will obligate it, and then go to work. So contract requirements are Am I on another slide yet?
No,
We're still here.
we're still there.
Still here. So the way it works after the contract happens, the work can begin as soon as the contract is obligated. Payments are reimbursed. The practice has to be complete and meet NRCS standards and specifications. So all these practices will have what they call practice implementation requirements. Basically, that's a fancy word for an instruction sheet. Here's what you're going to do, where you're going to do it, how you're going to do it. So these payment implementation requirements are done, in our case, are done by ACT. That's part of our agreement. I can no longer approve these things, but I send them into NRCS. Somebody with the proper approval authority will say, yes, this is how we're going to implement this practice. Everybody should get a practice implementation requirement for every practice. That way you know what's expected of you. So once practice is completed, you notify NRCS and they will contact somebody to check it. They can do it themselves, or in our case, our contract allows ACT to do the work, and I'm qualified to do that checkout for these folks. So I will come out to your field, I'll measure what actually got done. I'll make sure it was done according to standards and specifications, and I'll prepare the documentation NRCS needs to make a payment. Now, bear in mind, you're going to get paid for what you do. If you remember back in the beginning, we started talking about a draft plan. Well, we may have a 50-acre field, and we say, okay, we're going to burn it. Well, maybe only, we tried to make sure we got enough to not mess you up in the long run. But if you end up burning 20 acres, the 50-acre field, and that's all you need to do to complete that, to make that resource concern met, you're going to get paid for 20 acres. So bear in mind, your contract may have 50 acres at such a rate at this number. If you only do 20 acres, you're going to get that rate for 20 acres. So that needs to be known up front. And once that payment is made, you can't get any more. So if that happens, and say you did 20 acres, but you still had 25 or 30 to do, you may want to wait for the next season to get it all done, and you get paid for a full amount. So there's several flexible ways of going about getting these things done. So after the checkout's done, I provide the information to NRCS. Somebody with the proper approval will check out my checkout notes, tell the district conservationist this is ready to be paid. He will institute the payment process by developing a payment application form 1245. He will send that to you guys. You sign it, get it back to them, and then the whole procedure begins on how to get paid. And we won't go into that right now, but that's that. At that point, then you will get reimbursed for doing the jobs. People need to know up front, they need to lay the money out first to get it done. Okay, payments will be made by direct deposit. If the work falls behind schedule for any reason, say we didn't allow enough time for a prescribed burn, or maybe something happened, or a hurricane hit, all kinds of things can happen. The contracts have the ability to be modified. And scheduling changes for reasons beyond a person's control are perfectly acceptable reasons to do it. And the key is maintain communication with NRCS. If you dog them, don't answer phone calls, you're liable to get some nasty phone calls and maybe some nasty letters, because it is a contract, and there are consequences for not, following your contract. But that being said, keeping in contact and letting people know where you're at, these modifications can be made, and we can all get along nice and happily. Again, if you complete a contract item before the scheduled date, you can get paid for it. You don't have to do every contract item in the contract to get paid. You can get paid per item as you go along. There may be some exceptions here and there on that, but generally speaking, that's the way that works. So, if it's a standalone practice, definitely you can get paid as soon as you get it done. After the payment process occurs. That is what I have for the process.
Okay, thank you, George. So as Susan mentioned earlier in the start of the webinar, there are two other land management opportunities related to RCPP. And our friends at the North Florida Land Trust are going to be having workshops about these opportunities next week. And so in-person events, both at 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. at the locations that you see on the screen. I'm going to leave this up for a minute and I'm going to check the chat. We appreciate your patience because we had to go to a different format and showing the slides. So I think you may be seeing a lot of the things that I am showing on my screen, and I apologize about that. It doesn't look like we have any questions in the chat, but if you would like to ask a question, you're welcome to do that.
And reiterate that all of these land management opportunities are open now through,
July 31st.
okay.
Yeah, so just a
Say
couple,
that.
yeah, a couple more weeks to get those applications in. And at these physical events, we will also be participating, thanks to North Florida Land Trust inviting us, because there are a lot of overlaps with the different counties. And at these events, I know there's a particular focus on helping people fill out some of those early stage forms. So you will get, one-on-one different information and assistance in completing some of those early application forms.
Question, so, and this actually is a question for both of you. By July, I see, well, I need a forest management plan, all this stuff. You wouldn't necessarily have to have that by July 31st, right, to get started?
The only thing we need by July 31st is the application.
Okay,
So like I said, that what I showed you before was not linear necessarily, but the one drop dead deadline is we have to have somebody have ACT or NRCS has to have that application by July 31st to be eligible for this year. We can meet, we can talk about next year if you want, but without that application, that funding won't happen in fiscal year 2026. Just thinking, should I talk a little bit about some of the practices that we do, in case people didn't read it all off of that one slide? I was just thinking about that. Some of our common practices are fencing. Obviously, fencing can be part of a grazing system, but the main purpose of our RCPP fencing would be to exclude livestock from sensitive areas like wetlands or ponds or something like that. We can also help in Lake to Lagoon with some fencing for grazing practices. Fire break obviously is part of a prescribed fire situation, prescribed fire. Tree plantings, and there's different rates depending on whether you're planting bare root trees or containerized trees or hardwood trees, whatever. The example up here is just for planting containerized pines. Site prep, there's several ways of doing site prep. You can do just mechanical, you can do chemical. The rate here is for heavy mechanical, which would be like raking and bedding maybe, and also herbicide treatment. Pasture planting, again, talking about either rejuvenating really poor condition pastures that can be maintained with proper prescribed grazing, or converting cropland from cropland to grazing land. Herbaceous weed treatment for spraying weeds and or invasive plants. That's usually this is a spot spray. There's also rates for broadcast sprays and maybe mechanical treatment. Brush management, roller chopping is a good example. Forest stand improvement, it would be with a mulching mower, which is one of the most expensive practices. This one here has been tough in Florida because the contractors think very highly of their equipment and they don't like that particular rate, but we do the best we can. And conservation cover, which is planting native grasses and shrubs in forest or range situations. So I just want to put out a few of those. This isn't inclusive of all, but this is one of our most common practices.
George. Back, we're almost at the conclusion here. We will take some questions. I do want to give a shout out to our partners at the Natural Resources Conservation Service. We are in their office in Gainesville. We appreciate the meeting space and we appreciate everything you do for us, including helping us to deliver these RCPP programs. So we have a couple of questions that have come up that I want to pass to Susan and to George. And one is about with the contract work, how do you find contractors that are qualified? Or if you're the landowner and you can do the work yourself, can you then be paid for the work? Or how does that work? So how do you find contractors and could you be compensated yourself if you're qualified to do it?
Okay, So as I said, the payment rate that NRCS pays you no matter who does it, how you get it done. As long as it's done properly. So if you can do your own work, you can definitely get paid for your own work. The process as it is now, we don't necessarily even need to see receipts on who did work. You know, in the future that may happen. You can pay yourself if you want to out of this. It doesn't matter. We're just worried about getting the conservation practice done and on the ground. As far as how to find people, that's always been a difficult situation. When I was a district conservationist in my office, I had a list of local contractors that could do specific jobs. So your district conservationist is a good resource because most people that I know have that kind of list. The Florida Forest Service on their website has a really great list of people that do the kind of work that they have. So HCT has some, and I don't have a whole lot because I'm not yet. Our people have some. I would suggest people in the forestry realm, especially the North Florida Prescribed Fire Association, is associated with Alachua Conservation Trust. We have a staff member that heads that program up, who's a retired Florida Forest Service guy that trained Forest Service people how to burn. So we got one of the best experts in the state to help us out. And with this Prescribed Fire Association, it's a group of like-minded forest owners trying to get fire on the land. And this association works together to help each other get that done. So there's several things that that group can do. If you want to help somebody on a prescribed fire and you put in enough time and effort helping people, you can get a team of their volunteers to help you on your land. Again, may not cost you anything, and NRCS is going to pay it anyway. So you can buy the beer. But the point is, you're going to meet a bunch of people doing what you're doing. And the more you get to know these folks, they deal with herbicide applicators, they deal with tree planters. So the networking that can happen, and the Prescribed Fire Association in particular, is a big help to forest owners. So that's, and obviously with any other different land management group, the more people you get involved with in associations, a better network where you can learn who these contractors are.
Okay, a couple of questions, George, in the chat. How long does it take to get someone signed up with FSA to get a farm number? And then there was a subsequent question, is getting a farm number needed with the application?
Okay. I'll say one time and I'll stop. It depends. Okay. So generally speaking, biggest problem with a lot of people have a farm service agency is with very complex business structures. So if you have an entity with several entities involved and holding companies and this, that, there, then it could take a lot of time. I mean, it's not going to be a sit in the office to get it done one time. You may have to track down paperwork. You may have to track down signatures from your owners or your members. Generally speaking, most people can go to the Farm Service Agency and probably within an hour or two, the most, get everything done they need to get done. So that's normal. I mean, an individual can probably get it done in less than an hour. There'll be several forms they'll have to do. Several forms to set up the farm records and their business structure for them to get. And then there'll be information. One of the requirements of this is that you can't have any wetland violations. You can't have, if you filled in a wetland or destroyed a wetland or something, you're not eligible. So there'll be forms to fill out to help document whether that's okay or not. Usually in most NRCS programs, there's an adjusted gross income limitation. So somebody making more than $900,000 a year now would not be eligible for most NRCS programs. Our RCPP has gotten a waiver, so you only have to fill that form out. So generally speaking, most people within an hour can get that done. Farm and tract number, again, that can be done pretty quickly. I'm not sure if there's any technical answer to that. People sign up all the time without farm numbers, but it's got to get done pretty quick.
Correct. It's not needed for July 31st.
Right, exactly.
Right. That's the key. You only need it for a contract for July 31st. You don't need it. Although you need it for 1,200.
Right. So what'll happen is if you get an application and you're in the system, Eventually, NRCS is gonna announce a deadline and all your eligibility, including that farm number and track number. There's gonna be a drop dead deadline when that's gonna be done. And you'll be notified of that. So if you don't get that done by a certain date, your application will be marked ineligible and you'll have to come back when you get that figured out. That answer your questions?
Let me check to see if there's others. Okay, we've got some good advice about other places to find contractors. I have another question, George.
I think that might be the Forest Service. Yes.
Yeah, Florida Forest Service.
Yep.
That, yeah, George mentioned that.
Very good.
FDAX.
So then, whoops, there we go. Okay, so what about if a landowner has other EQIP or NRCS contracts? Is there any sort of prioritization, or is there anything that needs to be communicated to the NRCS to keep all of those things moving parallel and smoothly?
Right. You can have more than one conservation land management contract with NRCS. You can have an EQIP and a CSP, and you can have an RCPP. The big thing to remember here is you can't get paid for the same practice on the same piece of land during the lifespan of that practice. So you can't be double dipping. So that's the bottom line. So if you have an EQIP contract where you're doing pasture practices on one piece of land, you come to an RCPP on forest land, that's no problem. But you could have, again, you can have a forestry EQIP working on one field on your farm, and you can have an RCPP on the other. So yes, you can have different ones. You just can't duplicate effort and get paid double.
Let's check the chat again. Okay, we've got another question about the easement program, and so I'm going to turn this over to Susan. We didn't focus on easements today, but I would like to give everybody a chance to understand how would you apply or be considered for a possible conservation easement?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So, we do have, RCPP usually matches with something else. So if you're interested, eventually, an easement is kind of a long-term process. So, my advice is if you have working lands or whatever, apply for Rural and Family Lands Protection Program, which is a state easement purchase program through the Department of Agriculture. And I think maybe a lot of you may be in that program or on that list. That's great. We've had some success with actually matching the rural and family lands with RCPP funding. So you have a state source of funding and a federal source of funding. So when we don't have an open enrollment for RCPP right now, but we will, at some point, especially for that Lake to Lagoon area, which is Volusia County. So, if you're in Volusia County, I encourage you to check out Volusia County Forever, which is a county program that buys easements, because that marries up there. So what I'm saying is look at your state and county programs, get to know those, maybe get onto their lists and their systems, because that really helps when we kind of come in, the eligible entity being the state or the county actually transacts these easements with RCPP supplementing the easement. So we really have to have some eligibility around the state or county program. Now, if you're interested in, I call it a bargain sale of an easement, if you're interested in selling a conservation easement to, say, ACT or North Florida Land Trust, there's some opportunity to do that where you donate half the value of the easement and RCPP pays for half the value of the easement. So for that, I think maybe just reaching out to your local land trust is probably the best thing to do. Obviously, this is really complicated. And I think if you're interested in that kind of thing, reach out to myself or the folks at North Florida Land Trust if you happen to live up there. And we can kind of help you out because there's many different ways to get to that end. But I will repeat, we don't have anything right now open for an application for RCPP. But again, this is one of those things where you sort of get into another program first, maybe, and then work it through there. Does that make sense?
Thank you. We had one other question that George received that he wanted to cover. Maybe you could repeat the question and then talk about.
Yeah, okay, so what happens if, so this is our CPP land management contract. What happens if I lose interest and don't follow through? Will I be penalized with monetary or legal judgment?
Go to Jim.
When the district conservationists present you that contract, they'll present you with basically a plan which mimics what I did and gave to them. And hopefully they discuss with you and you agree and everything's right. There'll be a plan, there'll be a schedule of payments with the payment rates. There'll be a two-page contract which basically sums up their the legal agreement. And then there'll be about a 30-page appendix. This paper, you should need to read it before you sign. Very important. Like I said, things happen beyond your control. There are things in that appendix, this 30-page appendix, spell out the procedures on how you make modifications, how you can make changes. And it can be done, it's not a problem. It takes time, it's an effort, but it can be done. There'll be a part of that appendix that talks about recovery of costs. Once these contracts are obligated, people think, oh, well, I just won't use the money, give it to somebody else. But it doesn't work that way. This money goes back into the deep hole of government finances somewhere. Nobody gets it. A lot of people spend a lot of time getting this contract to where it is today. And it will state in that contract that if you violate the terms of the contract, again, if you don't answer the phone when people call you, if you don't answer emails or registered letters, they're going to terminate that contract and you could be charged up to 10% of the total cost of the contract. And it states very clearly, it's not a penalty. It is strictly a recovery of the cost. It's supposed to get this thing in place. So there is a financial incentive to finish your contract, but don't sign it if you don't intend to finish it. And if things beyond your control totally happen, you get sick, somebody dies, whatever. There's plenty of places where a contract can be completely canceled without this liquidated damages. Again, communicate with your conservationist and make sure you don't get in trouble.
Got 2 more minutes. Let me just check the chat again to see if there's any other questions. So we've got some contacts for NFLT, which is wonderful. Yeah, buying. We got a question. Are there vendors buying slash pines specifically?
I guess I need to clarify. You mean, are they selling them or are you talking about timber companies buying? So either, but there are nurseries that provide slash pine. And we do help pay for slash pine. And they sometimes in Forest to Gulf, they may not be prioritized as high as longleaf pine, but we have planted slash pine with our program. There are nurseries that do slash pine. As far as I know, all the timber companies will take them. So I'm not sure what your question was. That should answer both.
We'll check one more.
I'm not going to guarantee the price they're going to pay you because I hear
Yeah.
that's always a bad thing.
Oh, yeah, so
We're getting questions.
Jody asks, with the extreme budget cuts to NRCS, what is the realistic probability of actually getting funded over the next couple of years? Good question. So the thing about, so back to that where we start, we've been working on this for years and we sort of have this big bucket of money that's obligated to this project. So, right, Hillary? Okay, okay, I'm looking over that. So the good news is this, the freeze thing, I'll put that to this bucket of money is obligated for this purpose. Okay, so we're not dependent on annual appropriations of the national budget or anything like that. So this has already been set up, actually years ago. So we feel pretty confident that it's
we are pretty nervous that the lagoon was going to get axed completely, and now they said go forward. So
yeah,
we're going forward.
Right. So back to the map of those 2 RCPPs that we're talking about, this Forest to Gulf and Lake to Lagoon. The Lake to Lagoon one was frozen or put on pause for about 4 months. It is back. It's large and back, and we're going forward. And so we're pretty confident that the funding is there and predictable.
Oh, our contact information is on the screen. We really appreciate everybody, joining us today. There's more information on our website. There'll be information about this recording if you want to, view this again. Hopefully if there's also you have a chance to meet us, or get information about NFLTs at those workshops that we shared that take place, that information is also on their website. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. And, we will look forward to hearing from you if you have more questions or want to participate. Bye-bye.
Forward to seeing you.
More chat.